Man, this was such a great podcast. I've known John for about a year now, and he's one of the major powerhouses in the ReFi space. One of the leaders of ReFi DAO along with Daryl, and he has his own podcast, and you can tell he's such a good talker. Oh my gosh. We deep dive into his life and what got him started, where he's from. It's so funny because people who run podcasts rarely get this deep dive. They don't get interviewed. They're always doing the interviewing. It was really interesting, and of course at the end we end up diving into the work that he's doing with me at the Commons Stack for building local regenerative commons around cities, so that we can actually build this ReFi movement from the ground up, starting local for a global change. It's a really great podcast, and I hope you can enjoy it.
That should be nicer sound.
Ooh. Oh, yeah.
Did you get the uplift?
Yeah, totally. It was like, turned it up to 11. So let's get this party started.
Let's do it.
GM!
Boa tarde, man. It's afternoon for me, but GM to you, sir. How are you?
It's 1:30 a.m. here, so it's definitely a GM. Yeah. I'm in the Philippines, and I just decided not to change my time zone. Basically.
Wow, you are a rock star, man. Props to you.
It's just a good time, and I welcome everyone else to the podcast. I guess John and I vibe pretty well. We're actually just about to start a joint venture. So my new business partner, if you call what we do business, it's kind of hard.
Definitely, man. Definitely.
Yeah. But John, do you want to introduce yourself? Maybe tell the quick intro.
Sure, man. Yeah. So I am a social entrepreneur. I've been messing around with impact and tech and business since I was 16, struggling most of the time, finding my way some of the time. And I more recently really found myself at home at this very odd, unlikely intersection of climate and Web3. So that's kind of a top level, but behind the work scene, I'm also a husband and a father of 2 young boys. I live here in Portugal, and this is the first year that we haven't been living in community since we met, my wife and I met 11 years ago. So community is deep at heart, local action, regeneration, service. Those are all things that are really important to me. And I just love the ReFi space. I'm doing everything I can to support founders and, all the key actors in it. And I feel like this is my home, and I'll be here, until the job is done, until we see a regenerative economy and I can go, all right, cool. Pass the baton. Kids, you got this. Nothing to worry about. So that's me.
Wow, man. Yeah, that's actually, I want to go way deeper into that story. That's incredible. You were doing impact and tech when you were 16?
I mean, really low grade. I was a bit of a lost kid in high school. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I started, my dad bought me a computer super young. I started playing loads of video games. The internet was this Pandora's box of learning. And I started messing around with programming, not properly, a lot of people do. I was just copy pasting, kind of hacking around. Started making websites, and then was oh, cool. I could actually, set up a store and do this. And I was a bit of what they'd call a wankster, which is a wannabe gangster. I was the kid who had I don't know, shirts that were too big for me. Kids would always make fun of me. And I would make my own shoes, make my own shirts. And one day at a mall, this random guy was like, damn, bro, them kicks, how much you want for them? I'll give you $250. And I was like, what are you talking about, bro? $250 for these shoes. And so it started my first business called Just Customs, which is custom clothes online. What you see is what you get, kind of like Nike ID before the day. And that was sort of my first attempt at a social venture.
Wow. So you started your own clothing line. That's wild.
Yeah, I think kind of. That's a bit of a stretch to say. It was basically me and my homie doing airbrush in my bedroom, and later we had a workshop and selling stuff online. So yeah, it was a bit of a stretch to say that, but we made a good go at it. I dropped out of university to run that company. So
wow, that's so cool, man. That's so cool. And did you actually ever finish university?
No.
Yeah, why?
I know, right? Nobody's ever asked me for my degree. Like some of my
No.
friends gave me a hard time like during the time, being like, "Oh, yo, college dropout, you're like wasting your life." And I was like, "Watch me, bro. I don't need that piece of paper. I like learning out in the world, by doing stuff."
Yeah, you need that piece of paper if you want to be a cubicle jockey, but
I am in a cubicle.
yeah, you're very much inside the box, which I don't think is normally that way.
Not normally.
Yeah, but honestly, if you're an entrepreneur, school's just going to slow you down. Get out there early.
It can be, yeah. I mean, I know some people who like done the MBA thing and they're like super badass and they probably avoided loads of the mistakes that I did, but it just wasn't for me, man. I like learning on the grindstone and, go hard, fall hard, and that was just my style.
So how did you transition from, this startup to actual like impact in the climate stuff?
Yeah. So, there was a Haitian earthquake at the time. I think it was like 2008, and it was just quite shocking, really. It was like me and my buddy in suburban Colorado, like trying to make money making clothes online. Like, it's just stupid. Like, why don't we redirect a portion of our profits towards a better cause and like do clothing lines that raise awareness about what's happening and raise money for it? And that's where like the word just came in. So the concept of justice was an idea that I didn't really fully understand, but I yearned towards. And, like my dad was a sort of mentor to a kid on the streets who's involved in gang stuff from early on. So I got to kind of like had some tastes of people who, didn't have the palette of opportunities handed to them like I did growing up. So we didn't really do anything like truly impactful. But it was an effort, and, it was the kind of the taste of that opportunity of, for profit, but also for purpose, and, doing something that can sustain itself, not like a not-for-profit thing, a self-sustaining business model that can do good in the world is the core idea, but I didn't have the chops to pull it off.
Yeah. Well, especially early, right? And
yeah.
I mean, where did you go from there? Like, let's hear the story, the chronological.
You want to go into it?
Yeah, this is like really interesting, man.
Super fun. Yeah. So, I had the kind of like two parallel journeys. I had my sort of outward facing career journey, and then I had this inner journey of basically just like self-discovery of trying to understand who am I and what's my role in this world? Like, what are the problems that I really feel called to serve, and how can I help fix them? And so sometimes those two journeys were really well aligned, and sometimes they were quite dissonant. But after I sort of, spent all the money that I had for the venture, my dad wrote me a check for $5,000 to basically drop out of college. He was paying like $17,000 a year for me to go to liberal arts school. He's like, drop out of college, here's $5,000, like go for it. I'll be your first investor. So I blew through that cash making, crappy t-shirts in a warehouse and like trying to sell them to, people on stage. And like, it was cool in some ways. We got some order volume, but I just felt this inner sense that I didn't really know who I was. And so I ended up moving to Israel and studying Hebrew and volunteering in the desert to build an eco house. I was really interested in natural materials and then just like living more in harmony with the earth. And I was also like, curious about the crazy place of what they call the Holy Land and all the conflict that has arisen in that place in that time, and all the stories that people tell that really shape identity for billions of people all over the world. I found myself, in the crux of the Middle East, building a straw bale house in the desert under the stars with, no laptop in sight. And
wait, what's a straw bale house? Is it like straw bales just stacked on it?
Yeah, it's like one of the most thermally efficient building methodologies. You basically use straw bales as bricks, and you plaster it either in a clay render or in lime. And yeah, man, I've built one straw bale house almost end to end, and then I've like helped on other parts of it. So don't hire me to build your house. I was a crappy builder, but like I put my hand at it.
Wow, that's amazing. And so how long were you in Israel for?
I think like only 6, 7, maybe 8 months. So I kind of used my like, dropping out of college is like, oh, I'll study abroad now. Like I won't go back to university in New Orleans, but like I'll study abroad. And then that was my last semester. And so, yeah, I was there and ended up meeting the woman who's now my wife, who's an architect in London. She came to like get practical experience building, and she had this really keen passion towards community-led architecture, which is a new concept for me. And
Wow.
it was quite a seminal idea that architects normally design buildings in an office disconnected from the people that the building is intended for, and then they deliver a model and a bunch of technical drawings, and then the engineers and the builders, they go build it, and the people show up and they're like, okay, does this actually work? Like, is this for me? And she'd done some really cool projects in the Philippines, building structures for communities and building them with communities. And this like opened my eyes both towards community-led projects, also design, and I think just like the built environment itself. So we ended up raising money together and doing a project in India, building some classrooms for children with special needs, and getting our fair share of humble pie handed to us in the process.
Oh yeah, where in India?
It was a little town called Dehradun. It was like 8 hours northeast of Delhi, on the foothills of the Himalayas near Nepal.
Mm-hmm.
And man, it was a total experience.
Yeah, I bet. It's always there's this white savior complex thing, right? Like it's
totally we had it.
Yeah, really. And yeah, I mean, it's hard not to, right? You want to go and help people and be like, I got some ideas on how to help. And often they're just like, that's not helpful.
I know. Yeah. I think this is like a really broader pattern, even in the ReFi space. You know, we saw this with this like idea called Redemption DAO, which very much held this energy, which is like, we're a bunch of people in the West who have had opportunity and want to do good. And we're going to go to somewhere in an emerging market or developing world and like kind of do the stuff for the people in a way. Mm-hmm. And there is, I think, something very dangerous about this approach that we exhibited in India. And a friend of mine, Gilberto, is going to run some workshops for founders in ReFi DAO around understanding this like neo-colonial tendency in this era. And the things that we can do in ReFi to do things differently in a way that really flips that on its head and comes from a place of service and not knowing, as opposed to like, we're going to go in because we know. Yeah.
And so after India, did you, I mean, I haven't heard the like entry into the climate space really yet.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. You know, it's, I can kind of fast forward the journey here. But I had like a bit of a meandering journey until I found climate. I mean, we did the project in India, got our, ass hands handed to us in many ways. My wife got like super ill. We had to end up leaving the project, settled down in the States for a bit. And I like went back to what I knew, which was like websites and design, and just basically became like a freelance web designer. But now had this like community-led design process. And so I did freelance design for a while, ended up finding, some clients in the Bay Area, and was just like, okay, this is what I've been missing. This guy right here, this founder, his name is Robert Vogel, knows what I didn't know when I did my previous startup in, the clothing space. And I realized that like in the Bay Area, there was this entrepreneurial pedigree and aptitude that I just didn't have exposure to. Like my dad wasn't like this guy. He was a serial entrepreneur, built multi-million-dollar software companies, exited, and it's just a total different way of doing things. So he ended up hiring me, taking me under his wing. I helped him redesign his product and eventually get his company sold. And he actually asked me to take over his company as president, which I didn't end up doing for a variety of reasons. But that was the kind of seminal pivot point where I went from like floundering around, not really knowing what I was doing, to joining a successful company, making real contributions, going through a multi-million-dollar acquisition, and then working at a venture-backed firm. And like it was a civic tech company, so it was doing good in the space. And so that was kind of like the transition point from being a flounder to kind of having a little bit more of a sense of what I was doing.
It's amazing how valuable mentorship and apprenticeship really is. We don't we don't give it enough credit, I swear.
Yeah, and this guy was very much a mentor to me, and I appreciate him for that. And like I learned so much in the however many years, 2.5, 3 years I worked with him, and yeah, I would hope to slow down in my capacity at ReFi DAO and really engage in some of those relationships with some of the people here. So yeah, where do you want to go? I mean, we're almost there to the ReFi space yet, but yeah, I don't know how much of the detour you want to go through.
No, well, how did you even discover crypto? Did you discover it in San Francisco back then, or?
I mean, I heard about crypto like, all throughout, but always like sloughed Bitcoin off as sort of being bad for the planet and wasn't interested. And then I basically, after exiting Peak Democracy, that was the name of the startup, had some money to invest, started looking at investing towards impact, realized ESG stuff was just crap, and ended up setting up my own social enterprises in the UK to be able to have more control over the investment. And so there are two businesses I started then. Both of them are still going, but I have no involvement. And it was the learning. It was a long period. I mean, this is like a 6-year time period of running these two businesses that I came upon crypto really after listening to a Paul Graham talk at Y Combinator. I'd just gone through a second venture, a social enterprise called Goodery. It's a circular economy grocery store that I ran during the pandemic. I just exited it to an Indian food entrepreneur. Not like, oh, great, I've got lots of money exit. Like, I was running out of money and I was stressed out and totally in over my head. Can you please buy this off me kind of thing? And I was like, just trying to find what I was doing wrong, basically. And Paul Graham had this talk basically saying they invest at YC under a very clear thesis. They're looking for market opportunities growing at an annual rate of 20% per year or more. And they're looking at founders who are employing cutting edge technology that is making something possible for the first time. And it was that combination of like growing markets with cutting edge tech and founders with experience that I was like, that's what I'm missing. I wasn't attracting a growing market and I wasn't looking at cutting edge tech. So then I started looking at what are the growing markets and impact and what are the cutting edge tech. Went through a big kind of exhaustive discovery process and then stumbled on DeFi. It was really DeFi. It wasn't crypto. I did not care about any of the other stuff. Once I saw Maker, once I saw Aave, and once I saw Uniswap, the light bulb went off. And I was just like, holy crap. If this whole open source financial system that is, carrying huge amounts of value could be redesigned with impact in mind, this could change the world. This could be the greatest lever that I've ever seen.
Oh yeah. I mean, even just a 1% option of donating or supporting like nonprofit, like environmental causes on Aave or Uniswap. Man, could you imagine? Just one little button click would go so far.
Totally. And I applaud the KlimaDAO guys for this because they have this now option within Sushi on Polygon. And, I've been very critical about KlimaDAO in multiple venues. And I want to give them credit for that. But the problem is the default is off. The default is don't make an impact. And what we need is DeFi protocols with large volume and large liquidity to make the default impact. And I think that's what like Spiral's protocol is trying to start doing. And there's other actors in the space. But yeah, huge opportunities for leverage here.
So then how did you go from, wow, DeFi is cool, let's do something, to ReFi DAO?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I started making a list of everyone at the intersection of impact and Web3. I found Regen Network, Nori, Cello. I really vibed with the Cello website and the mission and the vision. And then I found KlimaDAO. And I'd kind of thrown some money around into the DeFi space just to like try it out and learn. And I bought into Olympus early. Like, what is this thing? Mark Cuban likes this. Like, why does he like it? I don't get it, but like, here's a bit of money and then I'll see what happens.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, KlimaDAO is doing an Olympus fork backed by Carbon. What the fuck is Carbon? And I was going through the Terra.do Learning for Action Climate Bootcamp, which is a great course, by the way. If anyone's looking to get into climate, highly recommend it. Amazing community, great curriculum. So I had a bit of a framing around the voluntary carbon market, the compliance markets. And I did what I usually do. And I was just like, win deep, started reading everything I could on KlimaDAO, on the carbon stuff, jumped into Discord, again, threw a little bit of money into the fair launch. And yeah, that was the kind of start of the journey. I had pretty negative experience during the launch. I had this really like dissonant experience of the whole Klima launch, and I ended up reaching out to Toucan being like, hey guys, I see what you're doing is the greatest point of leverage. If there could be 1,000 KlimaDAOs built on your tech, this could change the world. because I knew cleaning it out couldn't sustain. It was like $2,500 for a carbon coin that was worth like $2 on the off chain. Like, this doesn't make sense. Yeah. And so joined Toucan as an interim head of growth. They were going through a rapid growth stint. I had been in, high growth environments, and also had hard founder journeys, as I knew Raf and James were going to go through. So I led growth at Toucan, basically met all of the founders in ReFi as they were coming up, Stenver and Rez and Justin Alanis and Gordon Gould, like all these people who were building, and was like, man, we need a space. Like, it's not home for them in Toucan, because Toucan is just carbon, and like there's loads of stuff going on here. Like, we need a space to gather all the founders and hang out, because like being a founder is hard. It's super lonely and scary, and like no one else gets it. So let's build a home for founders. And it was really in meeting, we set up a Discord and a Twitter, but really like there wasn't anything until Daryl came along as like super experienced coach and social entrepreneur. And he was like, dude, I want to like coach ReFi founders. Like, what do you think I should do? And I was like, why don't you set up a founder circle, like peer support group, kind of group coaching environment. And that was kind of the origin really of what ReFi DAO became to be, was a space to gather and support founders in a high leverage way.
Where did you hear about founders circles? Like, that was honestly, I've only heard about it from ReFi DAO. So is that a thing?
It is. So there's a like startups.co, which is a startups fem brand, used to run them. I was looking at I was struggling in my previous venture at Goodery during the acquisition, before and after, and I was just like, how do I get help? Like, who else knows this? And it basically participated in some founder circles of like founders who are hanging out together, talking about founder stuff, and I personally found it really helpful. And so it's kind of like a mastermind group, but just for founders.
Interesting. That's cool. So it's pretty popular, and there's like documentation about how to start it and stuff. Like, you guys or did you have to build all that yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like a super popular thing, but it is a thing. And we've had to kind of build our own system from scratch and learn the hard lessons. It's been a great experience, and we've learned a lot. We've supported over 300 founders over the last 12 months, and kind of reaching a bit of an inflection point about, okay, this is what founders need, this is what the market needs, this is what investors are looking for, and this is what we can do to really accelerate this movement towards real world impact. Yeah,
and this is where you and I start hanging out, right? Like,
yes.
We met in the summer, but then I was running off to Burning Man, and we never really had a chance to jive. But then you participated in the Commons Prize, almost won. You were in the finals.
We were not ready for that yet. I'm glad we didn't win it. It was not the right time, but it was great to participate.
Apparently, the Commons Stack wasn't really ready for it either, because the Trusted Seed voted for the grassroots economics, but then grassroots economics couldn't really use what we were offering. So they were like, oh, the Commons Prize, that's cool. But actually, we want this. And it's like, oh, no, because all we got is
we can't deliver that. These are the tools we got.
We got hammers and screwdrivers, but you're looking for saws, and we just don't have saws. It's not like it's complex what you're looking for, but we just So that in the end, we still, of course, are really close with grassroots economics and have regular syncs and God, grassroots economics. I don't know of another crypto project that's making more impact on the ground anywhere.
So cool.
Yeah, starting community currencies for people in Kenya. Like, real crypto is being moved on dumb phones.
So cool.
So people can. Cool. Yeah, it's amazing.
Wow.
Like, Will Ruddock is a hero.
Kudos to those folks. It's amazing.
And he was doing these community currencies before crypto, was even a thing. He went to jail for this stuff. Like, he's a legend. Yeah. Like,
I had no idea.
The Kenyan shilling, right? They threw him in jail. And then he was found not guilty, luckily, and was able to get out. But like
whoa.
Yeah. Legend for sure.
Total legend.
So it was an honor to work with him, honestly. But in the end, we couldn't. They already had kind of a commons effectively. So, but now we're about to start a joint venture, and I'm curious. Like, what's your motivation for wanting to create an economy around like local ReFi cities and things like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think the mission of ReFi DAO was to accelerate impact for people on the planet. It was just like this really broad, we didn't really know exactly, but that was this broad mission. We had this thesis that founders were the key actor in this, that it would come through startups, lots of startups experimenting to change the world. And as we really began to understand the complexity of the climate crisis, biodiversity collapse, the markets that are emerging, we felt really drawn to what you guys were doing, which is like a process and a framework and tools to allow mission-driven communities to create, a common pool of wealth that they can then distribute towards whatever that mission's goal is. And as we were exploring it with you guys, there was just this sense that like we were missing a core part, which was the local community. And I think I just couldn't, I was imagining like raising a ReFi token and a ReFi Commons for ReFi DAO. And it was just like, this just doesn't work because it's missing the local voice. It's missing all of these people who are meeting in person all around the world. ReFi Spring did 27 events last season. They'll do like another 35 or 40 in loads of different continents, mostly in the developing world. And I was just like, those people are going to be locked out of this if we do this like global first approach. And we'll fail as a result, because if we don't give the people on the front lines of climate change the tools and the voice to participate in building this regenerative economy, we will lose. And so, the idea was like, okay, then maybe we start local. And as we started looking in that direction, it was like, wow, actually, this is really powerful because, there's this whole idea of like a startup ecosystem or a startup cluster. It's pretty well researched. Silicon Valley was like the great first shining example, but there's been a lot of initiatives that explored how do you replicate this in other cities. And now also with Web3, we've got like loads of different startup hubs all over the world. You've got SF in New York and Boston and London, Berlin, Lisbon, Bogota, Amsterdam, Barcelona. There's all these hubs and they've got events that are happening regularly. It's like, what would happen if you drew each of those startup communities where they're physically meeting, physically hanging out with founders, investors, academics, corporates, the local government officials, and created a commons for them, such that they had a common pool of wealth that they could deploy towards regeneration, but they weren't doing it alone. They were doing it in connection in a global online community with a bunch of other local cities doing the same thing. And I think this is really the hypothesis for the ReFi Commons Prize, is that we believe in order to catalyze a global regenerative economy, we need local startup ecosystems rooted in the work of regeneration that are both autonomous, but also connected to the greater good of the whole.
Yeah. Classic Eleanor Ostrom nested enterprises, right? Like really leaning in.
That's Eleanor, yes. I don't actually know that much of her work, but like it's interesting that these principles are there. So yeah, is there anything else you want to exfoliate on that? Like, 'cause this has been a huge inspiration for you guys.
Oh yeah, I mean everything we build is based off of this because she's the OG, like the real OG of dispelling this myth of the tragedy of the commons, right? Yeah. Everyone has this tragedy of the commons will never work. It's just like you write it off and you with that meme. That meme has been so powerful and so repressive, honestly. And she won a Nobel Prize for saying it's bullshit. Like, hell yeah, And then she makes it so easy. She distills her reasoning and about how you can overcome this tendency, maybe, for there to be a tragedy of the commons through 8 simple principles. And it's like when you break it down to a top 10 list, like this is something you read on Twitter and you're like, oh my God, this is great, and she just did such a great job at distilling it. And it's her life's work. And she's the first female to ever win a Nobel Prize in economics, right? And she really deserves it because this work is, it's so powerful and it's so real. Like, one of the rules is like for a commons to succeed, people need easy access to conflict resolution tooling, right?
Yes, totally.
Right? Conflicts need to be managed. And for any startup, like some of these principles, it's just like, for anything, right?
Yeah, any community.
Yeah, communities need these things. And that's really what commons are. They're communities around a cause,
communities around a cause. I love that.
when you were in Israel, were you in a kibbutz? Like, was that one of your
It
communities?
was a moshav, so it's kind of like a modern iteration of the kibbutz. It's not like fully communist, but yeah, it's a moshav. So yeah, shared resources, but also independent economics, like people running their own businesses, but also there's a shared, you know, concern for the moshav itself, and there's, you know, councils, and I didn't really get involved in the governance and stuff. I was kind of just volunteer, but yeah, it's an interesting model.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I would really love to see how those models implement the principles, and like if there's like a score or something that you could see and see if they compare, because I feel like I feel like she did such a good job at just researching like successful commons, you know, successful management of shared resources without governments being involved, and derived all these things. And these were the eight, when these principles were violated, it was very likely that the commons would eventually fail, and when they were upheld, they would succeed. And so the common stack just wants to add one more thing, and that's like sustainability, like you know, quantifying the economic value of the actual value you're producing, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really easy. She produced all this awesome content and value that we can build on, and just like add one crazy thing, right? The Web3 tech.
Web3 tech. Yeah, but it's the thing that makes it all possible, isn't it?
Yeah, it's what makes it investable. You know, like a factory on a river has a fiduciary duty to pollute that river. If they spend extra money to take care of their pollution in a more ethical way than what is mandated by the government, the investors can sue them, right? Like, this is just the reality of the world we live in.
These are the rules of the game.
Yeah. And the game of capitalism is a tough game to play and have a soul, right? But at the same time, it provides so much value in the exclusive. That factory isn't just like there to pollute the river. It's producing real products that people want, right? But unfortunately, capitalism has these market failures, right? Polluting the river, they just say, it's a market failure, write it off.
Totally.
But if we can actually say, hey, actually, a clean river has a lot of value to a lot of people.
And here's how we value it,
Yeah. We can counterbalance that, right? And so that's what excites me, and especially about the ReFi Commons Prize. You know, do you have an idea how we're going to do this? Like what cities are going to be like kind of like in the runnings? I know Lisbon's in there. I know, because we haven't talked about this. Like, I know. Really, we rarely get to hang out, so just gonna use this
totally so fun. Yeah, and I think as a segue to that, like what Eleanor Ostrom did is a shining example of the power of stories for the human mind. She took the residing economic story and said, I don't accept this, and I'm going to do research and basically demonstrate that there is a different story, that we can care for the commons. And now there's people like you and I who are inspired by this story and are now doing work to try and, you know, realize this mission and vision for regeneration. And so I think for me, like, as soon as we can raise enough funds to say go, and I think we're on that path, and launch the ReFi Commons Prize and really tell this story of regeneration to all of the startup clusters in the world, getting in touch with partners and really saying, hey, this is here, this is an opportunity. I think we'll see, you know, pretty much every major startup city with ReFi founders in it looking to participate. And so, you know, I think I'm obviously trying to seed the Lisbon community here. We've got our first meetup in February 17th. There's like 9 amazing organizers who've come around this, want to do a meetup every single month. So on fire, like really passionate about the space, but also talking to the folks at ReFi India, Pranav and Akshay and Irtu and Utkarsh, these guys who are also on fire for the story of regeneration. They're a bit more spread out, so it's a slightly different case than a given city. But I think, you know, my hope is that we can both allow people to emerge and also invite people into this opportunity to nominate their local community for the ReFi Commons Prize. So yeah, it could be fun to unpack that a little bit, and share a little bit more about like what it is and how it works and who's eligible. But I think this is going to be a really fun thing for the ReFi movement, and my hope is we look back and go, that was a turning point where things really started to escalate and grow in a positive way.
Yeah, and what is going on in Lisbon? I mean, I hear everyone moving to Lisbon. It's like all of my friends in crypto are like, yep, moving from Berlin to Lisbon, moving from here to Lisbon.
There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot. So yeah, I think, I would love to touch on the big picture stuff at ReFi Commons Prize, as well as go into the Lisbon piece. And I think like my head is a little bit going to the big picture of the Commons Prize before Lisbon, but I'll
Sure.
basically share like Lisbon is part of the reason why I've thought this way, which is I sort of was looking for a new home. I was in the UK. It wasn't a fertile environment to run a startup. I experienced that in a variety of ways. And I had a friend who's a serial entrepreneur who'd moved to Lisbon because of the startup ecosystem. And I was just like, why? Like, what is it? What's there? And what he described to me was a kind of a migration, a movement of a bunch of, digital talent from all over the world coming for the lifestyle of Lisbon, but also founders saying, I want to start my company here, and really beginning to like galvanize the people who have come here. So there's a local startup scene for sure. Startup Lisboa has done a great job of incubating this. There's, Web Summit. There's these big events that happen and tens of thousands of people congregate in the startup space. There's sustainability conferences, loads of Web3 conferences, NearCon, Solana Breakpoint. Like there's all these events that gather people together. But I think what's happened is there hasn't been the like Silicon Valley route of saying, we want to create our business here. And we want to build the culture here, and we want to make a commitment to this place. And I think for me, this is what I want. This is what I need. Is I want to see a Xerox park in Lisbon or outside for Regeneration. And I want to see, for those of you who don't know what Xerox Park was, like it was this major innovation hub in the Bay Area that like invented the mouse, and loads of different R&D projects came out of, and like an incredible amount of innovation happened because there were a bunch of smart people who were looking into how to advance the internet and the technological age. And you need physical location to do a lot of this stuff, because Regeneration is about real people doing real things with their fingers in the soil and in community and relationship with each other. And so I think Lisbon has a huge potential to be a core node in the ReFi movement. But love to kind of step back and sketch a bit of a bigger picture for the ReFi Commons Prize, a bit of the structure, and like maybe provide a call to action for people who are listening, who are excited about this story, to jump in and get involved. That sounds good. I mean, do we should we just go into what is the ReFi Commons Prize? Like, how does it work? What are we even building? Yeah, I think that sounds great. So, from my perspective, like the ReFi Commons Prize is a joint venture between ReFi DAO and Commons Stack, and it's really using this idea of a global startup movement rooted in local economies, but running this in a structured way to basically incubate 3 cities into what we call a ReFi Commons. And this idea of a ReFi Commons is kind of new, but it's basically what you said, is it's a community with a purpose, and the power of Web3 to go about fulfilling that purpose in a publicly verifiable way that is accessible to all. Non-rivalrous, not excludable. Anybody with a mobile phone and internet connection can get involved. And so the idea of saying, hey, we want to run a prize, we want to bring the amazing team at Commons Stack and some of the folks at ReFi DAO to support creating 3 of these local communities in these startup clusters around the world has, I think, a lot of potential to really galvanize the startup energy in the top startup cities towards this regenerative finance movement, and become a critical on-ramp to the next generation of users also for these natural capital assets and these protocols. And so, that's kind of a starting point. I don't know if you want to flesh out anything different from your perspective. Like, I love how you guys see things totally differently, but what's your take on what we're doing at ReFi Commons Prize, and like, how would you maybe describe it in your words?
Well, I mean, I don't know if I would say different, but I can, I run the technical side of things, so I'm always like, well, this is how it works, right? Which people don't actually want to hear most of the time. But But that's okay. I mean, basically, the Commons Stack launched the Token Engineering Commons, and it's been a great success.
Yes.
No donations, no taxes, but we're funding public goods, right? Through investment and aligned incentives where people have a say. And it was super cool. We raised $1.5 million in the summer of 2021. Ether was about $3,000, and we sold TEC tokens for $1. Right? If you actually held TEC, you killed the price of Ether. Like TEC is still 90 cents, right? And Ether is about half of what it was. So to think that a public goods focused economy can beat the price of Ether in these two years is that's insane to me, right?
But it's more stable, right? It's not as if it's grown, but it's less volatile and it's more stable, which I think is a really key feature for this.
Yeah, and this is what the bonding curve, our goal is really to build on top of the innovation of the bonding curve. Elinor Ostrom won a Nobel Prize in economics. I'm confident that, and I've said this a million times, but I'm confident that Simon de la Rouvier and the Bancorp team will also win a Nobel Prize for bonding curves because they allow a single-sided market. They allow low liquidity markets. And, that doesn't, what does that mean? Who cares, right? But before bonding curves, if you wanted to buy Amazon stock, someone had to sell it to you. You want to buy a chair, someone has to sell you the chair. You want to sell a bottle of water, someone has to buy your bottle of water, right? But with a bonding curve, it's a single-sided market. If you want to buy a token from a bonding curve, no one has to sell it to you. It's created on demand, right? And this allows you to have low liquidity public markets. And for something like ReFi Lisbon Commons, you would want to have it be public. You want people to have access to. You want people to be involved.
The ReFi Lisbon token, totally.
Yeah, exactly. So we need a bonding curve, and we need, like you said, startups are going to be like the end all be all here. And Giveth was large enough that we could launch a token without a bonding curve. Gitcoin, these projects have a lot of notoriety and a lot of already kind of following. Sure, but if you want to start up a Web3 public goods focused economy, you can't just do it. You need. You can't just launch a token. It won't have any
bootstrap it. You've got to bootstrap it, minimal resourcing, and maintain an efficient market and provide accessibility to people who want to get involved. Totally.
Yeah. And so that's what the bonding curve provides. It provides access to this capital and allows capital to be injected without a whole lot of volatility. And if the price starts going down in the secondary market, the bonding curve acts as the primary market. People can buy tokens in the secondary market and sell them into the bonding curve and make like an arbitrage.
So cool. Which creates value in the common pool, right?
Yeah. And we start reducing and shrinking the supply of the token to reduce volatility, right?
That's so cool.
Just through market forces. So that's really the capital like innovation. But with a TEC, we didn't have a reputation token. And we're really there are lots of things with the TEC that we want to improve on. And especially for ReFi, I like to think of there being 4 stakeholder groups. There's capital, but there's also the people who put in labor, the people who have expertise, and the benefit factors, right? The people who benefit from the work of the commons. How do we get all of these stakeholders represented? And how do we keep their representation if they need to sell a token, right? We need a non-transferable soul-bound token to be involved in the mix too, so that we can blend all the stakeholders. So I'm super excited to create this multi-stakeholder bottom-up economy around building ReFi startups in Lisbon, or really protecting the environment of Lisbon.
Totally, yeah, and I think the idea around the prize is that we initially were like, hey, let's just choose Lisbon because I'm there and there's a lot of activity there and it's a great slot. But I think we really do want to, we're going to go through this process of recognizing the key actors as you described, the contributors, the advisors, and, in the ReFi DAO community, giving them a vote to say, hey, which of these local ReFi commons should become a commons? And I think this is a really nice way for us to start our global governance decentralization process and to begin to work with reputation and to begin to have this on chain. Because so far, as everyone who knows ReFi DAO knows, like we're not a DAO yet. We're taking a very, very slow path towards progressive decentralization and doing it properly such that we avoid the mistakes that other experiments have made by doing things too fast, too quickly, and then realizing, oh, actually, you know what, we burned a bunch of people and, you know, didn't have the impact we intended at the end of the day. And so I think for me, like the core vision and story I have in my mind is like, in the way that Toucan and CleanMedAO galvanized hundreds of entrepreneurs and tens of VCs all over the world to pile into this space, I think we can have in a very small and local and humble way, people gathering in person and telling stories and enjoying food and drinks together to invite other people to join us. And when it's as easy as opening up your phone and buying a token in, you know, a few steps, you have access to this community, you can attend the events, and you can then begin to vote on what to do with the, you know, money in the treasury. People will feel so empowered by this because, you know, 84% of consumers say that they're gravely concerned about the climate. And a majority of those people don't know what to do. And if we can tell the masses of the world, the entrepreneurial minded, the building minded, the forward minded people, here's what you can do, get involved into a local community, you know, come into the commons and vote and get involved and do stuff and watch the impact, because it's on chain, it's publicly verifiable, and nobody can take that away from you. No government or no corporation can stand in the way and say, you got to wait for us to do the job, because they're just not going to move. They've shown time and time again that they cannot solve this complex coordination challenge. So it's up to us. It's up to the people. It's up to the private sector to create new economic models and to create a movement. Just the same way that YC did with Airbnb, that says, here's 100 startups that change the fabric of society forever. But instead of delivering value to a small number of, you know, shareholders and outsized returns, we want this to go to community. We want it to go to grassroots. We want it to go to the farmers, to, you know, the people who are protecting our natural habitats and restoring our planet. So this is my hope. This is my dream. It's a long-term aspiration, but I think if we start with 3 cities in the right places and we do this properly with your guys' tech and your guys' tooling, we've got a huge chance of starting something new and something really powerful. So I'm stoked.
Me too. And I completely agree. I feel like, you know, you just got to start small and scale it. And, you know, maybe we start and there's some things that just don't work. Well,
there will be 100%. There will be. That's why we want to start small. That's why.
And those first 3 cities, you know, they're going to be great. They're going to, I mean, the TEC has been an incredible success. And yet, man, there's so many things I want to do better. We start with these 3 cities and then we do it again. We have more cities. Maybe we don't do city approach. Maybe we do causes and we start.
Yes, dude, I love this there.
It's about finding a system that works and then applying it, making it better.
Totally.
And
I think the cause layer is super interesting. You know, I know we're running out of time here. We got like 5 minutes or so, but like imagine that 12 of the major startup cities have their own token, are actively engaged in the work of regeneration, are onboarding the best talent into the space, and there's a single online community bringing everybody together and a single global conference where everybody meets. And then imagine on top of that, you've got a plastic commons of everybody who's involved in removing plastic and preventing plastic to go into our oceans. They're all forming, you know, an economic alignment towards this mission. Imagine a biodiversity commons of people who are looking to pioneer a biodiversity market. Imagine, you know, digital MRV commons. Like we could layer so many different focus areas on top of this network and have nested commons, each with their own autonomy, but each with their own invitation to all of the talent and all the capital providers to join. Like I think this flywheel could be incredibly powerful long term. It'll take, you know, 20 years, but let's go. Let's go.
Yeah, exactly. It starts with year 1, right? So, well, I'm so excited to be in this joint venture with you. It's kind of fun. It's pretty funny that we're business partners who haven't met. This is I'm so, you know, I guess we did meet. We did meet, but
I know, but like, yeah, we barely know each other. I hear what you're saying.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, John. And how can people find you? How can people get involved?
Yeah, man. So I'm on Twitter at ClimateXCrypto, very original. And ReFi DAOist also is the ReFi DAO handle. Right now, we're invite-only community. We just want to invite Value Line founders and investors and contributors, but we're a really warm and welcoming bunch. And hopefully before long, we'll be able to announce the applications for the ReFi Commons Prize with you guys at Commons Stack and get every founder who's excited about regeneration in their city bringing small groups of people together and putting forward an application. Really looking for founders with a long-term vision of regeneration in their city. We're talking 7-year commitment in that place. We want people who are deeply rooted at the sense of place to come forth, and we'd love to work with the best candidates to shape these original ReFi Commons. And hopefully this will be a turning point for the whole movement.
I wonder how many people will listen to this podcast and then find out that they end up leading their own ReFi Commons. That would be so cool.
It'd be so sick. Let's find out, man. Well, hey, thanks for having me. It's been a great time. And yeah, love being on the show. Kudos to Ullman also. This setup is so cool. Like, you guys are doing some really good stuff here.
Thanks a lot, man. I'll see you in the calls.
The calls. Maybe we hang out at some point too.
Yeah, peace. See you, man.
Peace.